Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Blue Ox base plate on a 2017 Ford F-150. Now there's 5 main components when flat towing a vehicle. And the first one, we'll start off on the vehicle side, is going to be the base plate. And the base plate is where you actually attach to the frame or the bumper supports of the vehicle, creating a sturdy mount for your tow bar to attach. And that's going to be our second component. The tow bar creates the connection point between the towed vehicle and the RV. You're also going to have your diode wiring, which is going to transfer the turn signals, running lights, and brake lights, as well as sometimes 12-volt sources from our RV to the towed vehicle. And that way people behind you know what you're actually doing when you're turning and braking. You're also going to have your safety cables here, and just in case of an accidental disconnect, that's going to make sure that this stays attached. Now, if a catastrophic disconnect happens, you're also going to have your supplemental braking system. And what that's going to do is going to slow and stop the vehicle when the brakes are applied on the RV, but you also have a breakaway switch here included with that braking system. So if that disconnect happens, it's going to pull this pin, applying the brakes on the vehicle. That way it's not rolling down the highway. Now this base plate does a really fine job of making it look really OEM in the fact that you are actually replacing where your factory tow hooks were, and you're still going to have your safety chain loops here for hooking up. If you really need to put a tow strap there, you can still use that. But the great part is it keeps this nice and clean, and it still allows you to easily hook up when flat towing. Now you'll see here it is slightly recessed in, and when you are ready to hook up, pretty easy. You're just going to grab one of the arms in here and you just rotate this around. That's going to drop in place, and then once that clicks in, it's going to be locked. Now with both of our arms in place, we can actually hook our tow bar up to it. Now this is a Blue Ox, so when getting a tow bar, you're going to want to make sure that you get something that has the Blue Ox adapter, and that's just going to allow it to attach onto here. Now we are using the Blue Ox Avail, so it's going to have the Blue Ox adapters here, but you can actually pick them up for Roadmaster or Demco or Etrailer or even Kurt. So get those adapters, that way you can actually mount up to your base plate, and it's going to be pretty easy here. You'll see this is just going to kind of rotate here. We'll put our arm, it's got a nice little sticker that puts up, but once you align these in, you're going to just grab your pin, slide this in place, put this pin in, and that arm is attached. Now with our safety cables, I'm going to just cross them over, and those click in nice and easy there. It's kind of great. You have plenty of clearance to be able to get your safety chains on there. So now with the rest of our components all hooked up, we're ready to actually get our vehicle flat towing and on the road. Now in terms of installation, this is a relatively easy base plate. You're going to be removing your front bumper, and you'll be dropping down your factory tow hooks. Now once you have those tow hooks in place, you use the factory hardware to cinch it up. You are going to be drilling through the frame, but it really makes a nice little spot. It lines it up for you, so it's pretty easy. Just have some bits ready. That way you can get through that frame rail. To begin our installation, we're eventually going to be taking off the bumper, but we're going to start by pulling this plastic cover off. Now this is one piece, so we're going to want to take our time as there's clips along here, but this is going to gain us some access to some bolts. But the way you're going to want to do this is kind of pulling on here. You're going to start to see where the clips are. We see some up top here, just barely in between. So what I'm going to try to do is just kind of start prying back, try to get some of these clips to pop off, and then we'll kind of work from one side, get the other side, and then work our way towards the middle. So I'm going to use a trim panel tool here. That's just going to kind of give me leverage underneath here, and that's going to allow those clips to pop off a little bit easier, and it's kind of a little easier than using your fingers. So I got this side. I'm going to start prying on this side, and then we'll kind of work on this center section since it's a little bit thinner. So I have my 2 sections here loosened up, so I'm going to work my way along here. Now there's going to be clips on the back side where this license plate frame is, and you can probably reach back here and pinch those clips. You can kind of see them there. I can also kind of put my tool in here and just give it a twist to pop this out. There's that. I'm gonna get this side. And then you can see kind of where these clips are. So this will give you a good idea if you're getting hung up, kind of where you need to go to pry on those. But working where the clips are, that's gonna just kind of keep the pressure there. That way you're not cracking your plastic. So now we're gonna go on the back side of the bumper, and that's gonna bring us to this large nut here. And this is gonna be a 21 millimeter. You're gonna have one on each side. So we're gonna go ahead and remove those. Now your truck may have adaptive cruise control, and if that's the case, you're gonna have a few 11 millimeter bolts, and you're just gonna take that off. Ours does not, so we're gonna move ahead, and we see that we have nuts here again on studs, so it's gonna be that same 21 millimeter. Now I'm gonna remove one from each side, and then I'm gonna just have one still slightly threaded on. That way it's gonna hold it on while I get the other side, because we will be removing it, but we also don't want this to drop on us as we're taking this off. Go ahead and do the same on the other side. Now at this point you might want to grab an extra set of hands, and we could remove those nuts that were hand tightened on both sides, and that's going to allow us to actually get this bumper off. Now there probably is going to be, well, I know for sure, your fog lamp connections, but you might have some other electrical connections. So it's important as you're taking the bumper off, kind of just take your time. That way you're not damaging any of the wires here. So as I peel this back, you're going to see the fog lamp here. I'm going to go ahead and get this unplugged. I'm just going to lift that tab up. That should come out. Now there's also going to be a plastic push pin here, and that just kind of attaches this into the bumper. So you can actually pry that out or just kind of pull it off, and that's going to help us separate it. Another thing I see here is you can see this kind of rubberization here that they have in between the bumper and the grill, and it's got a little plastic clip here, so I'm going to separate that as well. There we go. And then we also have some plastic push pins is in here as well. So as you kind of work your way, you may have to pop those off. And then we do have the same fog lamp wiring on the other side, so we'll get that separated, and then the bumper should come off. Okay, so with our fog lights taken off and those plastic push pins pulled off, we now have our bumper off. So let's go ahead and we'll set this aside somewhere safe. Now we can remove the covers here that go on the tow hooks, and you can see they just kind of pop and slide off. And we're going to be removing the tow hooks themselves, so you'll see underneath there's going to be two 15 millimeter bolts. So I'll go ahead and get those off. So we'll take these, and there's also this plate that they actually screwed into with the weld nuts, so we'll go ahead and set these aside. So we have the tow hooks removed. We're going to need to put that weld plate back up, and we have our existing hardware. Now we are going to be using some red Loctite here, and the base plate, it's just going to slide up. Now you have these holes underneath, so we're just going to feed that hardware up here. I'm going to get this first one just kind of hand tightened in to kind of hold that in place for us. Okay, now I can put my other one in, and I'm just going to loosely get it there, and then I'll be able to put some thread lock on our threads before tightening this up. Okay, so I kind of got those started. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually push this up, and I know these threads are going to have to go through that weld plate, so just putting a little thread lock. It's kind of a tricky one to get on this back one here. So now I can go back, tighten these up, and we're going to want to make sure that the side of this is sitting flush against the frame, because we're going to be drilling some holes, and this really kind of sets that up to make sure that it's nice and flush against it. Now, if you didn't have factory tow hooks, it is going to be a little bit different, and you're going to want to actually refer to the instruction manual, and you'll be using the supplied hardware to make this happen. It's basically just going to be some washers and some nylon lock nuts there. But since we have ours, we have it nice and tight and thread locked. I'm going back with my torque wrench here, and I'm going to torque these down to the manufacturer's recommendations in the instruction manual. Now, if you don't have a torque wrench, you actually have these here at Etrailer. You can pick one up, or you can generally rent them at an auto parts store. But this is going to make sure that they're not too tight, but also it's not going to become loose over time. So now that I know that this is tightened and it's cinched against our frame here nice and flush, we're going to go back with a large drill bit here, and we're going to have to drill through the frame basically large enough to feed our bolts through, and then we have our weld nuts that we can actually tighten it up. But for now, I'd have one of these handy, just kind of drill it to the size of this, and you may have to kind of just make it large enough to where we can get our threads through, and then you know that you're good. Now, it may take starting with a small bit and kind of piloting that through and then slowly enlarging it. And once you get to the point where you're just about there, what I'm going to do is just take my file and kind of get some of these edges down. You can kind of waller that out with a drill bit, but we'll continue until we can get this passed through. And then we're just going to continue the same step on the other side as well as the other side of the vehicle by mounting this up and drilling those holes. So now we have our bolt, and it does pass through both of the holes, and we're going to just put a lock washer on here. Now the back one, we're going to be using this little weld nut here that's we actually have on this stem here, and that's just going to allow us to kind of put this in place as we feed this through, and then we can kind of just go ahead and get this tightened done. You can see straight down the frame rail, so lining it up shouldn't be too terribly hard to do. And I'm going to just get this nice and tight. And before I get too crazy, I'm going to just put a little bit of Loctite here where those threads are actually going to go in that weld plate. And you're going to want to do this on all of the hardware, and this just gives it that added step of making sure that it's not going to actually become loose over time. So we'll go ahead and get this tightened in. And this little welded on little arm here is going to just kind of stay in place until we get the torque wrench on here. So I'm actually going to go ahead, grab my torque wrench, get this one torqued down before doing my other one. So using my 19mm socket and my torque wrench, I'm just using the instruction manual for those torque settings again, and I'm going to get this torqued down properly. And this should kind of stay in place once it's tight. It may move up, but it's going to kind of hold that in to where we can get this torqued down. And now that I have that torqued properly, what I can do is you can kind of just move this around, and that's going to pop off. So we have this properly torqued in place. Now on this one, we're not going to be using this. We can actually get our nylon nut. So let's go ahead and get our hardware, and we'll get this tightened in. So again, we're going to use that split washer. We're going to place it on there, and then I'll pass this through, and then I'll have my nylon lock nut here, and this is just going to go on here. So I'm going to actually need to take my 19mm wrench, and I'm going to hold that in place here. And then we can go ahead and tighten and torque this one down to the same torque settings as our back one. So now we have everything tightened and torqued. This is pretty much good on this side. Now we do have to put these cables here, and this is just going to make sure that it's holding on to the base plate, and it's going to wrap around the frame of the vehicle. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but we'll be using our links here to kind of make that loop. And again, you're looking to attach it to the base plate, but also go around the frame and really have a nice support just in case. So I think I'm going to put around here, there's this body mount. I can wrap this around, and I'll get it attached and show you how I did it. So this is just going to be in case of an accidental disconnect. That way, if this happens to rip through the frame, not that I think that it would, this is still going to keep this attached with this cable. So you can see I just used our link and attached it to the hole on the base plate. I've wrapped it around the frame here, and it just kind of comes out on this side. Now make sure that there's no moving parts like electrical, like your fans or suspension or steering or anything like that, but looping around here should put it in a nice spot, and that should hold it securely. So now that we have this side done, we're just going to repeat that same process on the other side. Now, if this is the first step of the rest of your flat toe installation, I highly recommend keeping the bumper off. And the reason being is routing wires is going to be quite a bit easier having that bumper off, as you're going to have your electrical or your diode wiring as well as your brake disconnect switch. So you're going to want to make sure that you're able to route that wire into where you need to. And again, just not having the bumper in the way makes it a lot easier. And that was a look and installation of the Blue Ox base plate on a 2017 Ford F-150.